Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Sicilian Alapin as white, line number 5. Okay, let's summarize today's line. Sicilian defense, Alapin variation on the board, and our opponent goes knight f6 this time. We drive the knight once, then we drive the knight twice. They drive our bishop once, then they drive our bishop twice. They attack our e-pawn, we defend our e-pawn, and then they attack it again. We can't hold it, so we trade off. As soon as we see their queen come out, we castle to safety. Their bishop goes to g4, pinning our knight, and now we're going to see 4 moves on the e-file. We bring our rook to the e-file, they advance their pawn on the e-file, we move our queen to the e-file, and they bring their bishop to the e-file. Once all 4 of those have occurred, we go knight a3, attacking that c4 pawn. Our opponent doesn't think that we dare take it, so they castle. Oh, we dare. That pawn's stopping our d-pawn from advancing. So we take, they take, we take, and now they can take here at f3 and double up the pawns in front of our king. They think that's a bad thing. It actually turns out that that's going to be an asset. They bring their knight to e5. We bring our queen to e4, threatening to take the knight, as well as checkmate at h7. They have to block with their knight. And then we go d4 at this point. The most common move at this point is to back their bishop out, back to d8 to prepare to put it behind the queen. And now we start advancing that doubled pawn to f4. They put their bishop behind their queen, but it's not a problem. Their knight can't move without being checkmated, and the pawn's being protected by our bishop. So now we're going to push h4. So now we're going to get both of those on their knight. They bring the rook to e8, preparing to push their f-pawn, and so we attack their knight with our h-pawn, and now they do that threat with the f-pawn, and our queen needs to go somewhere. It's going to take the pawn at b7, which makes our c-pawn be a passed pawn, and now their knight has a good escape. They take at f4, we trade off, and then we bring our bishop to b3, attacking that pinned pawn at e6, and that's the end of the line. And now let's get into the details and the explanation. Okay. So, as usual, we have what's common on the left and what's strong on the right. This is my custom written program on the right, showing pre-mapped Stockfish 18 engine scores to a pretty good depth. All right, so we can see knight f6 and its score plus 0.11. That means white is what I like to call 11 points ahead. So, they go knight f6. That's one of their top engine moves. Here's the 5 most common moves here. I've marked them in black over here on the side, and we can see their scores pre-calculated ahead of time. So they go knight f6, and now the scores are recalculated again to the same depth. So we can keep seeing how this plays out and see what's powerful on the right and what's common on the left. This is a very strong way to map openings. All right, so they bring their knight out to f6. We go e5. We can see that's our dominant way forward. So let's take a look at this and follow along. Excuse me. Knight d5 is their only good move. We can see the engine saying that over here on the right. So they go knight d5. And now we see 3 top engine moves here. Now, they look like there's a big difference between them. Well, a moderate difference between them. It looks like bishop to c4 is dominant here. But as you map deeper, it's not the case. All 3 of these are neck and neck. They're all equally engine strong. They are, so if you remember the 4 factors I care about engine strength. They're all equally strong. I care about trickiness. They're all tricky. I care about minimizing my branching. They all branch a ton. Well, they all branch as much as all openings branch. So I can't see a difference between their branching or the trickiness or the top engine score. So what's the 4th criteria I care about? Obscurity. We're going to choose bishop c4 because of obscurity. Again, the most dominant factor on whether you come out of the opening with as big of a lead as possible is how much bigger your book is than their book. It's not the engine strength of the opening. The dominant factor is the relative book sizes. So by choosing bishop c4, you are going to shrink their book. They are going to map d4 the most because 72% of the time white players play d4 and 15% of the time they play knight f3. Players playing black, playing this knight f6 variation against our Alapin, need to prepare for d4 and knight f6 predominantly. Bishop c4 is going to get less time in their opening prep to prepare for. And so that's going to be their smaller book. We're going to make it our biggest book, and that will give us a higher likelihood of having a bigger book than them and coming out with a bigger lead. So bishop c4, that's the reasoning behind that move. And right now, Stockfish thinks it has a lead of 17 points. And as we go in, it's still 17 points, but you're going to see that fluctuate here and there and slowly drift a little bit down and then back up again, depending on what they play. All right, so knight b6 is their top engine move. We also see e6. Knight b6 happens 2/3 of the time, though. So they go knight b6. That's what we're going to be following. This is a very common line. We're going to go bishop b3 as our only good move. And then c4 is 36% of the time. So that's not, there's other branches here that they might do, and we'll have to learn those another time. So, but c4 is the lion's share of what we're going to run into. So let's study that one. So they go c4, and we can see that's a top engine move. Our lead's now down to 15. And then we go bishop c2, now it's down to 11, and then it jumps back up to 16. So we can see that Stockfish can see a little more accurately as it forgets what's behind it and steps forward and looks to the same depth. All right, so knight c6 at this point is their top engine move. They are playing very, very well, and so are we. So knight c6, knight f3. We're following this opening optimally so far. Okay, at this point we have some branching, and it looks like d6 and d5, are that it's split evenly between 4 moves here, but that's not true, because we're going to respond to d6 with taking that pawn, and we're going to respond to d5 with taking that pawn en passant. So we can combine those two. So we actually get 55% coverage here by taking the pawn regardless of what they do. All right, so d6 we take. And then over here we can see d6 or d5, it just transposes, so I'll just hit d5 and we can see that we're going to take en passant there. All right, at this point, queen takes d6 we have 2 common moves. Queen takes d6 is 75% of the time, dominant move, and e takes d6 is only 11%, and we can see the strength of that. E takes d6 is not a good move. It puts us 81 points ahead instead of 20 points ahead. Oh, our score is up to 20 now. Their queen takes, now it's down to 18. Our queen takes, we castle. All right, and now our score is sitting here at about 14. You see it's dwindling down a little bit. If they do bishop g4, their top engine move. And bishop g4 is 75% of the coverage here. So again, we're getting a lot of very broad coverage with minimal effort by mapping this line and learning how to handle it really deep. All right, so they do that bishop to g4 pin, and now rook h1. There were some other moves I could have done. I looked down them all. I like rook to e1 best. All right. Now at this point, we see that e6 is 52% of the continuation. So the most intuitive thing for players at this level, which is what? Rook e1, 23.48 is the average rating down this line. So these aren't wimpy players. These aren't amateurs. So rook to e1, the most common continuation of players rated 23.50 roughly, is e6. That's what looks most intuitive to them. And if we look at e6, it is neck and neck with 95, but I've been down the 95 line and it looks better. It gets our score a lot lower, and it's a lot more it's a lot easier for them and less tricky for it's a better line for black. So if they're playing e6, I think that they might be out of book at this point, and they might not have mapped this at move 10. And they might have chosen e6, but the line we're gonna go down, we're gonna see that they probably haven't mapped it much further than that. So e6 is not necessarily a mistake or an inaccuracy at this point, but it might be. So e6. We now have a number of good moves. Our score is in the 20s now, roughly, and we have a lot of options. And our opponent has to prepare for all 5 of those. That's why I don't think they would have chosen e6. It slightly increases our score down all the lines and gives them a whole ton of lines to learn. So I think they're out of book after e6. All right. We are actually going to choose queen e2. It's not the highest scoring at this snapshot in time, but it is neck and neck with all of them. All 5 of these moves are all decent. But queen e2 is the line that leads to the most errors. Their bad moves look good, their good moves look bad, and they mess it up. And that's why I'm choosing it. All right, so the trickiness factor. All right, scores much higher in trickiness. All right, so castle queenside is their top engine move at this point, and their main good move. They only do it 6% of the time. When we go queen e2, 84% of players rated 2299, so 2300 are playing bishop e7, and that's why I'm saying I don't think the e6 move is, I think they're out of book at that point. And then they go bishop e7. And now we're going to choose knight a3. So bishop e7, knight a3. We could have done h3 at that point. Even b3 was another option, and I looked down those. But knight a3 is very error prone, and that's why we did the queen e2 move. It's against the e6, and it's why we're going knight a3 against bishop e7. So those two positions, after they go e6, we had a number of responses. After they went bishop e7, we had a number of responses. I chose queen e2 and knight a3 because those two, amongst the many combinations that we could have done, I looked at every combination, and this one has the highest error rate. They messed this up a lot. The three most common moves, 35%, 26%, and 18%, you add those together and you're looking at, like, let's see, 30, 40, 50, 60, 71, 79, almost 80% of the time they're playing one of these three moves. And take a look at them on the side here. Queen d5, queen c5, castling, not good moves. They need to move their queen again, not castle. They need to go queen f4, putting pressure on that knight. How often do they play queen f4? 3 games out of 204 games, 1% rounded. All right. And if we look at this, castling is their most common move, and that's the worst of the three. Okay, it puts us 90 points ahead. Queen c5 is second, and that's the second worst of the three. Queen d5 is the least common of the three and is the best of the three. So this is a really good line to do this queen e2 and knight a3 version. All right, so we're going to prepare for castling because that happens 35% of the time. It's definitely the most common move, and we're going to learn how to punish that one. All right, so they castle. Our lead goes all the way up to 90, and then it dips down to 84 if we do knight takes c4. And we can see that h3, and if we jump into it, we can see these scores. h3 is not nearly as good as knight takes c4. People are scared of getting their pawns doubled, especially in front of their king, but that's only a problem if they can get their pieces in. Where are their pieces? Nowhere near that point, and we can start advancing them. That's another problem with doubled pawns. They're hard to advance, but we don't have a problem advancing them. And it's aimed at their king side, and it also opens a file toward their king side. So this is a really good way to continue, is to take that pawn that is preventing our d-pawn from going forward. That thing's been a thorn on our side the whole game, and the loss of it dramatically weakens black's position despite our doubled pawns. All right, you can see that knight takes c4 at that point is what they need to do now that they've committed. So we take at c4 after they've castled, they take back, and now we take. All right, at this point, queen takes c4. They need to double up our pawns. That is their best way forward now that they've committed to it. So they double up our pawns. And now we can see what's common. Knight e5 is 39%, almost 40%. So the better part of half the time, they're going to go knight e5. So we're going to prepare for that. But look at knight e5. Look at how bad it is, plus 104. What about rook at a to c8, the other common one here, 88 points ahead. Let's expand that for later. All right, so, and then what are the other common ones here? e5, let's mark these. I didn't mark these beforehand, sorry. G6. All right, now we can see the spread of what's likely and their scores. Rook at f to d8 is, and rook at a to c8 are the two optimal moves. G6 is pretty good. But knight e5 is the most common, 39% of the time. And so that's what we're going to prepare for because we're going to face it the most. And that actually puts us even more in the lead. It looks very intuitive, right? Attack our queen, attack the f3 pawn. If they could get an extra turn, they'd be looking really good if we could move that, if we couldn't move the queen to defend that. But we can. Now, we have two good moves, queen f4 and queen e4. I didn't care for queen f4. It looks like this. We go queen f4, pinning that knight. They go knight g6 is their top engine move at that point, so they go there. And now, as you can see over here on the scores, we need to trade queens. So we take, and now our score, they take back with the bishop, and then, you know, we could go d4 at that point, our top engine move, and our final position looks like this. And we're in an endgame now. We're in an endgame. We're about 100 points ahead, and the likelihood of them messing that up is not very high. So it doesn't have a very good trickiness factor if we go queen f4. All right. So let's get rid of queen f4 right here, and let's instead do queen e4. We're going to do that one. Queen f4 and queen e4 are neck and neck. Queen e4, though, has a higher trickiness factor. As we'll see, we're going to increase our score even more before we reach an endgame that involves the queens. All right, knight g6. They have to play that because we're attacking their knight, threatening to win it, and we're attacking h7, threatening checkmate. So they got to go knight g6. So they go there once we've gone queen e4. And now we can see that we have d4 and queen takes b7. The engine likes queen takes b7 best, taking that pawn in the corner, which, by the way, makes our c pawn be a completely passed pawn. That's very good. But the problem is their top engine move is very intuitive and easy to find. Rook at a to b8. So is e5, their second best move. Very easy to find moves. And our score ends up being, you know, the better part of 100 points. So if we back up and look at d4 instead, it's very error prone. And what do we risk? 20 points. Okay, and that queen takes b7, it goes down to 74, so it's not as high, and our 74 has a high likelihood of going higher. So these two, that looks like queen takes b7 is better. I have a lot of experience with the engine and its behavior. If it shows these two at this step being imbalanced like this, they might fluctuate up and down, both of them, but it's highly likely that queen takes b7 is slightly higher in the end if it's dropping down and d4 is trending a little bit up. The queen takes b7 is probably slightly better if an engine is playing against an engine where they don't make mistakes. But d4 has moves that black needs to pull out of his hat that are really, really difficult to find. Very, very tricky, and we can see that immediately. So this is the better way to go. You get a much higher trickiness factor. I doubt anyone who's made the mistakes to get to this position, well, we know they're out of book at this point. They've made some serious mistakes. Let's see here. We know that they don't know their book at this point, and so after we do d4, instead of taking that pawn in the corner, take a look at these scores. My gosh, bishop d8 is almost half the responses, and look how bad it is. Okay, it doubles our score. What do they need to do in this position after we go d4? They need to go queen c7. Okay. They need to go queen c7, preparing to put the bishop in front of the queen, not behind it. But what does everybody do? 7, okay, there's only 15 games here. Granted, that's not a huge sample. However, look at these ratings. They're all between 2,300 and 2,600. A lot of them are in the 2,400s, 2,500s. These are some really high-rated players. Compared to what we usually run into down a lot of these lines. And they're all choosing bishop d8. 7 out of 15. Almost 50% of them are going bishop d8 at this point. There's the score for bishop d8. Where's queen c7, the top engine move? Out of 15 games, 0. Nobody played it. And if they don't play queen to c7, everything else is significantly higher and much better than if we had taken that pawn in the corner. So d4 is clearly the better move here against humans. All right. Against an engine, go take that pawn, but you better be an engine too, because now your queen's going to get driven and it's very tricky. All right, every queen move matters at that point. So bishop d8, preparing to put the bishop behind the queen and aim it down that diagonal, is the most common intuitive thing for players of this rating. So bishop to d8. Bishop d8, and now we can see the scores on the side. f4 is our dominant move. I took a look at some of the others. They're not nearly as good. All right, so we play f4. And now, at this point, their top engine move is to go h6. But usually they go bishop c7. They were just preparing, so we go f4. And then they go bishop c7. They were preparing that to aim down that diagonal. They complete that process. The problem, though, is their knight's pinned. If they move that knight, we checkmate them. And they can't take it with their queen because our bishop backs it up. So they can't take that f4 pawn. So it ends up solidifying our dominance on the dark squares. Look at this. We have an advanced d pawn. It's at d4. They have an e pawn that's at e6. So ours is pushed farther than theirs is. Ours is backed up, and it can't be challenged with the c pawn. It's long gone. Our f pawn is definitely preventing it from coming forward, and we managed to push it. It's mobile. It's not locked up and blockaded like doubled pawns often end up being when they're weak. And we can see that the path forward, the engine is showing it to us over here on the right. All right, they put their bishop here at c7. We've already pushed f4. So as soon as they back that bishop off, we're pushing the f pawn forward. They get behind the pawn, we push the h pawn forward. We're mobilizing the isolated weak h pawn. We're mobilizing the isolated double pawns, and that's why they're not weak. That's why they're an asset. They're aiming at the king's side, which we want to bust open. We've got bishops aiming that way. We also have an open file now going that way. Yeah, their queen might get through here, and we got to be careful of that. But if we were to calculate it, and that's what the engine's doing for us, we can see that the advantages dramatically outweigh the drawbacks. So at this point, they need to go rook at A to E8 is their top engine move. And that, let's see here, F4, bishop C7, H4. We had one game at this point continue that way. A couple 2,300 players continued. So we only have one game of data, so we're out of data at this point. And we can't be certain what our opponents will play, but we can do some good educated guesses at this point. Rook at A to E8 was played 1 out of 1 games, and it is the top engine move. So we ought to learn how to handle that. Another move that I thought I might want to glance at is sometimes when we push a flank pawn, they push their flank pawn. So I thought I'd glance at that. What do we do against H5 here? Stopping that advancement, Queen F3. Queen F3 is what the engine loves here best. It's clearly the dominant move. We take aim at that H pawn, and then at that point, our queen is no longer threatening checkmate, and their knight becomes immobile, and they can take that F4 pawn that was doubled. So they could do that. But then we've got rook to E5. We cut off protection of that knight. The knight's protecting H5. That knight, that they can't defend that knight. The knight has to move, and we can pop off H5, and that's how we handle an H4 push to stop our advancing H pawn. All right, so that's how we stopped that, but that's not what happened in the game. And what happened was rook at A to E8, and the reason is if they push that F pawn, we can just take at E6 check. So instead, they bring the rook to E8. So they have somewhere to move their knight when we push H5, which is what we do. We can see that H5 is clearly the dominant engine move at this point. Our lead is up to 178 points. The next best is 118. So we're definitely going to push H5. So we push H5, and now their only good move is F5. Everything else is absolutely losing. 192 points we're ahead. Anything else is 450 points ahead or worse. So we end up dominating. So F5 is how they handle the attack on their knight. And now, as we take a look at that, Queen F3 is how the game continued. But that's not the best move. Here's Queen F3. That's the second best move. And they just flushed away more than half their score. And we're seeing that time and time again throughout all these openings that 10 moves in, 15 moves in, 20 moves in, doesn't matter. There are moves with massive point swings throughout every game of chess in every combination that can be played. And that's why depth matters, but we need to pick common moves so that we can get to that depth consistently. Anyway, queen takes b7 is what we're going to do now that our queen's under attack. Our queen is still on this diagonal. It can still drop back to g2 if we needed to, or h1 to defend things if necessary. And now that we take that pawn, that makes it so our c pawn is completely passed. So if we trade down, we could have a really favorable endgame. And their only good move, as you can see on the side here, once we've done that, is knight takes f4. They get a pawn back, and their queen gets into our position. So don't be too scared of that. We needed to look at it. The engine did that for us, and we can see it's not as dangerous as it looks. Because once they get in, we trade off. Our bishop taking f4 is clearly the dominant move there. We take, and now we can see their queen has to obviously take back. And now bishop b3 is our dominant move here. They are now threatening, now that our bishop moved and stopped supporting b2. As soon as it did, it threatened their queen, so they had to take it. But now that that's no longer the case, their rook can come to b8, threatening our queen and attacking the b2 pawn behind it. So we need to take care of that. At the same time, we need to create some threats because now they're staring down into our position, and we don't want them getting in and wreaking any havoc. So bishop b3. That protects our b pawn, aims at the e6 pawn, pins it, puts two pieces on it, and this is the reason our lead is what it is. That's why we're 193 points ahead in this final position. All right, let's glance at some of the things that we can do here. Yes, their queen is getting to our position, but their queen has to babysit their bishop. Our queen is putting pressure on it. We're also attacking the a pawn. And we're threatening to win the endgame if things get traded down, so they need to be very careful here, and it has to be played very precisely. Now, let's look at some things that just jump out at me at this end position. The top engine move does. King to h8 definitely jumps out because it breaks the pin. Yeah, we've won that other pawn, and that's why our lead is looking so good. If they do break that pin, we have a number of options. King f1 is the top engine move at this point, and it's looking the most promising to me. Rook takes e6 is another possibility, and rook at a to d1. I haven't mapped deeper because I don't know what's going to be common at that point. Okay, so anyway, If they break the pin if they move their king to break the pin, I like moving our king. All right, next thing they might do, queen h2 check. They're staying on the diagonal, they're protecting our bishop. We go king f1 at that point, obviously, it's our only move. And now we can see if they go king h8, we can go queen f3 as our dominant move. If they go queen h3 check, you could block with your queen if you really want to, but the engine is saying a much better move is king e2. And yeah, they've got queen takes h5 check, and then our king has to move, but then they're opening up a file to the king, and we've already got a bishop staring that way, we've got a queen on the last rank staring that way, and if they open up both the files leading to their queen and we bring our rooks over there and our king gets to safety, this can look really bad for them. So it likes our score at that point. King e2 is the move if they check us in the corner and then check us again at h3. All right, what else might they do here? Bishop d8 is not awful compared to the other moves here. It's a little bit weaker. How do we respond? Well, we got 5 potentials. I'm liking, rook takes e6 is looking good, threatening to now move the rook with check, and then we can trade off. King to f1 is also a good move here as well. Queen h1 is a decent move. And even bishop takes e6 is good, but not quite as good. And they'll just move into the corner. So probably take with the rook at that point, or maybe go king f1. Those are both possibilities. If they bring their bishop to d8, threatening to bring it over to h5 and bring it into our position. All right. So bishop b6, maybe they move the bishop protecting the a pawn. We handle that with rook to e3. Or king f1, or rook takes e6 even. Those are all good moves. Rook e3 is at this snapshot in time looking like the best engine move. These ones don't look as good right there. And that's the end of the line. And I hope you liked it. Until next time, thank you.